Hey everyone, welcome to today's edition of One Single Story. It is Thursday, and we're in Nehemiah chapter 5, and we are going to have a conversation around financial injustices. So it says, about this time, some of the men and their wives raised a cry of protest against their fellow Jews. They were saying, "We have such large families, we need more food to survive." Others said, "We have mortgaged our fields, vineyards, and homes to get food during the famine." And others said, "We have had to borrow money on our fields and vineyards to pay our taxes. We belong to the same family as those who are wealthy, and our children are just like theirs. Yet we must sell our children into slavery just to get enough money to live. We have already sold some of our daughters, and we are helpless to do anything about it, for our fields and vineyards are already mortgaged to others." When I heard their complaints, I was very angry. After thinking it over, I spoke out against these nobles and officials. I told them, "You are hurting your own relatives by charging them interest when they borrow money." Then I called a public meeting to deal with the problem. So some people are suffering financially at the hands of family members, people who should be looking out for them. And there's this significant inequality. The question that I want us to talk about today is how do we go about correcting financial injustices? What are our responsibility in fixing those problems?
In his case, and I feel like it's a good thing for us to do too, is it seemed like he investigated for the truth first. And then once he found that out, he actually called out the people who were the transgressors, basically, by saying, "Wait a second, do you realize, what you're doing? Do you realize what you're doing to the people that you're supposed to be supporting, not hurting
Right.
and driving down into the ground?" And I guess, again, that's just going back to, let's find out what the truth is, and then let's expose it and put it out there in the open and be honest with it and deal with, how do things get this way?
Right.
Yeah, and it's important to be honest with who you're lending money to. I mean, it seems that they might have been lending money to people they knew couldn't pay it back potentially.
Right.
That is a very bad practice to be in, and maybe
But it sure is common.
well, yes, and it happens. I mean, it happens today as well, and I think that's something that we need to take if we're going to be lending someone money. We need to take the extra steps to make sure that it's going to be able to be paid back, and if not, in their case, it is, as you're saying, it is family, and it is people that you should be taking care of. At a certain point, it just becomes giving money. I think if it's there are small examples of times when someone didn't have money, we all went out together for something with the students, and some people didn't have money, and I just pay for it. I'm not. I'm not like at every youth group being like, "All right, you owe me for that ice cream I bought you 2 months ago."
Plus 15%.
Yes, it was interest. No, but that's the thing. Is you just it's fine. It's okay. I didn't want you to miss out. We were all together, and that's fine. And and make sure they don't feel that burden of I owe them back for this. Because even I know they could probably pay me back. It's not a lot of money, but it's just I think it's a good practice to just, if it's people you love, you care about, your relationship with them, just take care of them.
I'll tell you something funny. Recently, one of my grandkids went on a trip with you, and I'm pretty sure y'all were paying for their meals when they
Yes,
traveled.
yeah.
And so I sent him Apple Cash to his phone so he can buy stuff. And I had sent him some that morning, and you were shopping somewhere, maybe at a mall, and he needed more money. I was like, "What happened to the first $20?" He said, "I bought lunch." I said, "Why didn't you let Zack pay for lunch?" He said, "I told him I was going to pay for my own." And I think sometimes we don't always think that. But I when he got home, we had a conversation not about that. I was explaining to him that there are a lot of kids that don't have that privilege.
That's right.
Like he asked me for another $20, I can send it. There are a lot of kids who aren't in that.
They're not going to have it.
They're not in that position.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I have all the answers, and I don't know this podcast, we're experts enough to be able to resolve this issue. But I think it's a conversation that we have to have in financial injustices. you were talking about loaning money to people, whether they can repay. The poorest people of our country pay the highest amount of interest.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the people who can least afford
Mm-hmm.
to pay the money back. If I go to
Because
buy,
they know there's a higher probability
That's right.
they won't be able to pay
Exactly.
it back. Yeah.
If I go buy a new car, I'm going to get the lowest interest rate that's out there. But somebody else, though, that is poor, that is making a minimum wage job, but they need a vehicle, they're going to go and buy a used vehicle, and they're going to pay probably a premium price for a used vehicle because they're going to have to finance it. Plus, they're going to pay some exorbitant amount of interest, that is going to crush them, and they're never going to, I don't want to say never going to get it paid off, but it seems like it's eternal. And we don't have enough of these conversations as a society.
My daughter is a senior in high school this year, and she's been learning a lot about personal finance. And she's had to figure out, like, how much is this loan for that you take out on this house? Look at the length of it. How much interest you're going to have paid by the time the house is paid for. And she was like, oh my gosh, why would you do that? And I said, well, a lot of people don't have a choice, but then a lot of people get houses bigger than they need or more expensive, than they require. And then I was explaining to her, like, your ability to overpay, and how that affects the life of it. But I really think that it's so common in our society now that it is shocking to people to realize exactly how much money you do end up spending in things like interest over a certain period of time.
And if you have bad credit, or you've had a bad experience, or you don't make a lot of money, you're going to pay a higher interest rate.
Yes, even worse.
And so it's even more painful.
So at my last church, and I'm planning on doing this here as well, for our seniors, we do these meetings. We have these 4 senior gatherings where the first one we talk about finding a church when you go to college, like what should you be looking for in a church, and the next one we talk about the Enneagram. But the third meeting I always have talks about personal finance, and I always bring in somebody to talk to them about. And it seems like a weird thing, like what does that have to do with one thing doesn't look like the others, but it's important to understand credit card debt.
It's really
important to understand
because when they
interest
turn
rates.
18, they're going to be able to apply for one on their own.
And I think talking about this within the context of church, within the church group, and like even about the importance of giving and the importance of tithing, but then that not being even the full focus, but being like, this is something that, like, everything we have belongs to God. This is talking about being a good steward, and that is always many times, even though it's very informational based, like the students, that's one of their favorite sessions that we would do, because they're not learning about this in school. They're not talking about this even their parents don't even know necessarily how to go about doing this. So bringing in someone who knows a lot more than I do about personal finance, and being able to talk to them within the context of, like, we're all Christians here, and being able to talk about this and prepare them for what comes next, I think is extremely important, because you can fall into I fell into some things. I made some bad financial decisions because I just didn't know any better. I got tricked into buying some pots one time. Not the drug, but some pots, because I was like, oh, this sounds awesome. Like, because before Jess and I got married, and it was I didn't realize how high the interest rate was, and it was gonna cost. It ended up costing us like $2,000 for this pot set. And I had just no idea.
Are you
You
still
couldn't
using
afford
them?
any food to put in the
No.
pot.
You're not.
They weren't even very good pots.
Oh, no.
Yeah,
wow.
it was a really bad decision.
Oh, gosh.
And I was like, I don't want you to fall into this. Don't buy pots or pot. Both bad decisions. But yeah, so just go to Kohl's, okay? But yeah. Anyways, but I think having that, and I think hearing it from believers who care about you very much, not just your finances, but care about you, I think is.
So when you see injustices, how do you deal with it? Because you can go back in history and you can see extremes between the haves and the have-nots. And that, based on the numbers statistically we see in our country, that gap is getting wider. Now the bottom is coming up. The bottom is much better off than they were 50 years ago. The people, at least statistically speaking, somebody's going to crucify me for making that blanket statement. But for the most part, the standard of living at the bottom has increased, but the gap has gotten wider. Things like you have payday loans who prey on people who need, money for immediately, that they're in a bind. Pawn shops do the same thing. They don't just buy and sell stuff. They loan you money at 25% interest a month, not a year, a month.
Yeah.
So if they give you $100, you go back the next month, you're going to pay $125 to get it back. Well, a wealthy person doesn't have that problem. A person, even, you don't have to be wealthy. A middle-class person typically is not going to have that problem. If they needed $100, they just put it on a credit card and they kick the can down the road a little bit. Whereas a poor person's got to figure something out, What are some places where you might think there are financial injustices in the world today?
I think that there are financial injustices that happen as a result of people's circumstances. Because I'm thinking about kids, that are graduating high school. And so I guess I can give you something really in particular with that, is that as we have been going through the process with our daughter of, looking at colleges, how much does it cost, just having to go through all the application processes, visiting the colleges, the fact that it costs money to apply to a college and you have lots of forms to fill out. And I just recently told my husband, I said, I've realized that this system is not set up for everybody. Because it is supposed to be a situation where if you need financial aid in order to go to college, then you will be able to apply for that and get it. But if you don't have anybody in your life who has any idea how to fill that information out or who cares to help you with it, yes.
Yeah,
I mean, I can see how from the very beginning it defeats some of the very people whose lives are going to be the most changed by the education that they could gain. But just the beginning of the process is so insurmountable for some kids that they're never going to get there.
I think injustice. I think of the lottery. It sounds like, I think the lottery it keeps a lot of people down because it's like, it's like preying on people's hope in a lot of ways of like this dream that, oh man, like if I can just get this, and it almost creates an addiction in people and it's, that I hate to see, and that,
I heard a different theory about that recently.
Oh yeah.
They were saying the person has pretty much zero chance of winning.
Yeah.
Right. But that $1 or $2 ticket gives them a hope for a couple of days. Like that's a cheap investment to have a couple of days of hope. And they were, and I do recognize that the majority of people who play the lottery are poor people. They're trying to get rich, but they were looking at it a different way, that it's a cheap dream, for some people. But yeah,
I got something much better to put your hope in, but I think I've just seen people affected by that and other things that just like that. Even though, and I can understand like that argument of like, well, it is giving them hope. And maybe that ticket's the thing that keeps them going for
certainly
days longer.
That's right. It's a false hope. Yeah.
But it is a false hope, and and so do we want to build our lives, even though it keeps us alive maybe, but do we want to keep our lives built on small false hopes, or do we want to find hope in the one real thing that matters? And I think that's why we're here,
Yeah. And so this is not in Bible, it's just my own personal observation. If a job requires a full-time person, it's worth more than $7.25 an hour. Period. Like if they're a part-time person and they're just looking for an extra income or they need to get out of the house, whatever, that's one thing. But if it requires a full-time person, it's worth more than $7.25 an hour. And there are a lot of full-time, well, there were pre-COVID. There are not many minimum wage jobs anymore, but I think about even in our daycare, the going wages, they're not living wages that those
No.
people are paid, but they have one of the most primary jobs in all of the world. Much of their development is going to be done in that setting.
Teachers.
Yeah, teachers
Do you
are
know
the
that
same
North
way.
Carolina teachers are 49th in the nation for their pay?
Yeah, well, it depends on where you look at it. Yeah, some would say it's 25, 30, 35. It depends on what metric you're looking at,
I mean, my sister's been teaching for almost 30 years, and I know what she makes, and you'd be shocked.
No, I wouldn't be shocked because I mean, I've seen the scale. Like, they can't make but so much. Well, Lord forgive me. The only reason why you work for the state anyway is for the retirement and the benefits. That's because you're not getting rich.
Well, some people love teaching children.
I was saying maybe they're
That's right,
called
yeah.
to it,
Yeah,
Steve.
huh?
I
So
mean,
maybe they're called to
there's
Well,
it.
some
not-
people would be called to it, but I can't imagine
Why
a
else
job.
would you do that for that pay?
I
unless
can't
you loved
imagine
it?
a job where I would work for 30 years and the top end is $55,000, $60,000.
Because they love children. They
Yeah.
believe in their education.
Yeah, and they have to.
Yeah.
And that's a challenge, and sometimes I think we take advantage of people's callings,
Mm-hmm.
because of that
Yes.
in a lot of places.
Mhm.
That's why y'all don't get paid much.
Thanks.
Any other places or any other things that y'all want to point out about financial injustices?
I think it's really important to be aware of them. As a young kid who's getting ready to become an adult, and just as an adult, because I think we do take a lot of that stuff for granted as just a regular part of our society. This is just how we do things. But I agree. Like, we've done the John Maxwell courses here before, and I think we could stand to do more things that actually almost expose those truths to people,
Right.
so that they know what they're getting into. Because it could ruin your life. It could make a huge.
Yeah.
If you're paying
a bad
20+% interest on something, it's going
Yes.
to take eternity to pay it off.
Yeah.
And when it's over with, and most of the things we're paying a house is different. You hope it appreciates, but most of the things people are paying, it ain't worth nothing by the time you have it
it's
paid
paid
off.
for.
Your TV,
Yeah.
Yep.
your couch,
A lot of
your
times your
pots and
car.
pans.
Yes, pots and pans. Gosh,
Yeah.
that was a horrible decision. But I think too, like when you're saying like awareness, I think being aware of even the people around us or the people that owe us something. Sure, like maybe they do owe us, but even still, I think we as believers, we need to be showing grace. I think that is an opportunity to show grace to people around us and show Christ to them, because Jesus showed us grace when we did not deserve it.
Mhm.
There's no way we could pay him back for what he did. The price he paid, there is nothing we could ever do to pay that back. And yet he showed us grace. He paid that for us, and we should do the same for others.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us on this edition of One Single Story. I hope you'll be back tomorrow as we finish up our conversation about the book of Nehemiah.